Great. Well, thank you all so much for having me tonight. My guess is we're probably going to have people sort of straggling in as we get going, which is fine. So what we can do to start, maybe to make the best of our time here, since we do have quite a bit of time, is let's start out first while people are joining. And is there a specific question or curiosity that you most want to get answered or understood tonight? If you've got something you brought with you to the meeting that you're curious about, let's start putting those in the chat now, because that'll give us an opportunity, and Neil's going to moderate for me so that we can make sure we answer some of those. So I'm just going to give you a minute right now, pull up the chat and type in there anything maybe specific you're hoping to see or to understand or learn from tonight, so I can make sure I am addressing what you're interested in. Everybody's got one of those. I hear a little bit of typing, so that's cool.
Did you share a port or something?
Is the chat not working?
It's
Is it frozen for folks?
no, it's just not remembering people that joining late like me.
Oh, weird.
Oh, that's how Zoom works.
The Zoom chat should be right at the bottom on your meeting controls.
If somebody's posted something, I haven't seen it yet. Maybe I'm not.
Nope.
Chat isn't working for me either. It's weird. I shouldn't make too many weird faces on the video, but maybe we'll have chat challenges. We'll have to just speak, but there's plenty of us, time together. Oh, there we go. I saw that one. All right, there we go.
Yep,
It's working. Good. Okay. All right. So really excited to be here tonight. See, sustaining change in organizations. Oh yeah, we could talk a lot about that one, Jeffrey. So good. We'll get to some of that. So really excited to be here with all of you. As Neil said, my name's April Mills. I've been here. Was this my third time now, Neil? It's at least my second, maybe my third. And yeah, third. Okay. And I was here last spring talking about this book I was thinking of writing, Change Tactics. I was doing pre-orders. I was all energetic. I was thinking, this pandemic thing, it's going to be over soon. My kids will be back at school. I'll get this book written. It'll be great. And then the rest of 2020 happened, and the book project drug out as my 4 kids were home and not back in school. And finally this spring, I said, I don't know if this pandemic stuff's really going to wane anytime soon. Let's just get it done, get the book written. So I'm really excited to be here and share with you now the outcome of the book. It came out early in July. So it's available paperback, ebook, and hopefully maybe later this fall in audiobook as well. So I'm working on that. And really grateful to be here and talk to you about Change Tactics. And I labeled this an introduction. We're just going to cover some core concepts from it and how the book is set up to be that go-to reference guide for you as you are dealing with change challenges that you face. And so as we're going through this, if you have read the book and you've got curiosity, or if you've got a specific problem, we'll be able to, at the end, figure out, okay, what are some tactics from the book we could apply to your challenge? And really excited to do that with you. Looks like we've got a nice small size group, so we really should be able to dig into whatever you're most curious about tonight. So, all right, here we go. Let's see if this is going to go for me. There we go. So as we think about change, so often we spend a lot of time trying to understand the details of, say, the system change, the behavior change, the organizational change we're trying to drive. But I don't find people spending as much time paying attention to the details of how they're creating the change they want. Most of that runs by defaults. Whatever the status quo is for how we make change in this organization, people just rinse and repeat that same pattern. If you're in an organization which is all around that sort of solo, hero that goes in and makes the change happen, you'll have those heroes flying around doing their changes. If you're in an organization that has the initiative system where you launch an initiative and there's a team and they have a plan and a budget and then they go execute with this big bang sort of change, you'll be accustomed to that. And if you're in maybe a more agile environment or more networked environment, maybe you've got a different experience. And what I wanted to do with change tactics was take the conversation that I'd started in my first book and expand it out to help people really break from what can feel like a sort of blah status quo of the same old, that maybe if you've done this several times, you're feeling like there's got to be something better than this. There's got to be something better than sending another email. There's got to be something better than getting the boss involved again. And so I wanted to fill in the gaps for, if not that, then what? And propose things to help you move forward. And I love this illustration that Sarah Moyle, my illustrator, did, because at least for me, how I paint this in my mind and how I've experienced it, it really is this coming alive as you switch from the status quo to the change tactics. And it can really feel like there's a whole new dimension. If any of you, grew up watching The Wizard of Oz, right? That moment where Dorothy goes from the black and white to the Technicolor is how it strikes me as you change tactics. And I hope as you leverage the book and practice with these techniques, you'll feel that coming alive and that colorization of the world of change for you too. So in the first book, Everyone is a Change Agent, what I was focusing on was helping folks understand their own agency, their own ability wherever they are to create powerful change. This was the call to action for folks to not wait to be selected as the VP or the general manager, or even the manager, or even the project manager, Scrum Master, anything. Don't wait to be in a position, lead from where you are, and use these tactics to deliver greater results. Because what I found in my experience, and as I read the literature and talked with others, is that when you try to use the traditional methods, the status quo of creating change without the authority, you often get defeated and beat down. And so I wanted to offer people something that would work from where they were, so they could do what I call drive change. Choose it for yourself, clear the obstacles for others to choose it too, so you can climb that mountain of success. And so the first core key concept, both in Everyone's a Change Agent and what foundation that I built all the change tactics on for the book Change Tactics, is on this clear distinction between driving change and driving people. Driving people is using that coercion, that compulsion, that pushing to compel others to change. And driving change is that choosing the change for yourself and clearing the obstacles for others to choose it too. You cannot do both of these at the same time. It really is a clear choice. Which one will I do? And this choice makes all the difference. It's why it was Change Agent Essential #1. And it's why it's the foundation for everything in change tactics. So getting really clear on these concepts of driving people, using coercion, driving change, leading from the front, is vital to help understand all of what I would say is this whole new space of change that opens up to you when you cease driving people and start driving change. But what I found is just setting that foundation of that expectation, and along with some of the other change agent essentials, really wasn't enough to get folks comfortable and confident with being a different sort of change leader. They would try a little bit and fall off, and try a little bit and fall off. And so much like this example, if anybody's seen the video called the backwards bicycle, where, right, the guy builds the bicycle where the gearing, rather than when you turn, the wheel goes with the steering wheel, it's actually geared to go opposite. And he's trying to test whether or not he can actually train his brain in a different pattern when it's almost muscle memory. It's embedded in you once you learn how to ride a bike, what you need to do to stabilize. And in effect, he's trying to reverse that so he can succeed at riding the backwards bicycle. And the video shows him trying and falling and trying and falling and trying and falling until it clicks. What change tactics is meant to do is help you get that practice on the backwards bicycle of driving change instead of driving people. Because what I found is though people wanted to shift without the practice in shifting to driving change and a clear and immense amount of tactics to stay there, it was just a habit and it would eat back and people would be back to driving people. So it's into this space of helping you practice to get that driving change that I offer change tactics. And the layout of the book, it's pretty straightforward. It's much like a recipe book for change. You know, it depends on what you're interested in eating that day, right? Of change. What's the situation in front of me? What is this situation calling for? And how can I find something that meets that calling? This is not something where it's like, okay, I'm going to do this one, then this one, then this one, and in a giant project plan of 50 tasks. That's not what I built it for. Maybe you'll find a situation to use it in like that. I doubt it. It's more of a, I'm encountering this, or I can see this on the horizon. What are some tactics I could use to stay in driving change and be different at that point, not just back to my status quo? So if you go through the book, what you'll find, there's 50 tactics. 50 can feel like a lot. It felt like a lot to write it, I'll be honest. But I actually started with a list of 114, and then I pared it back to 50. Because I figured if I gave you a book 114 change tactics, you'd go, oh, that's too many, and give up. Because that seems like too much practice and too many things to pick from. And maybe you're thinking, how would I even pick from 50 to get started? Well, there's 5 sections for you. Change tactics for you. If what you're dealing with is how do I keep myself in driving change? Change tactics for them. How do you leverage driving change to keep folks with you on your change? Change tactics for planning. How do we shift from a plan based on making other people do things to a driving change plan of what will we commit to do and how will we clear the obstacles? Change tactics for action. How do we keep ourselves in that role modeling, demonstrating, not staying stuck space instead of directing and disciplining and correcting to the plan? And then change tactics for assessment, because you do actually have to measure a driving change initiative differently than you would typically measure a driving people, which is just about scoring and punishing. Instead, we're really looking at what's the opportunity for personal development, team development, organizational development, and results when we're driving change. So hopefully that sets the standard for what you might go looking for, depending on what your challenge is, and shrinks the book down to more manageable amounts to pick from. And what you'll find in each tactic is a repeated pattern so that you know what you're going to get before you get to the tactic. Each tactic includes a goal. What are we trying to achieve? The status quo tactic. What do we typically do when we're trying to achieve that goal? The change tactic. How, given we're going to drive change, not people, would we approach this instead? And then why is this important to do this? And then the main section of each tactic goes into details, both here's what typically happens in the status quo, here's what the change tactic will look like. And then sometimes there's a story or a worksheet, which helps enliven that and makes it easier for you to implement. And then if you look past that, what you'll find is, for example, this is one, you can tell I'm playing to my audience, right? From change waterfall to change agility. And what you'll find is things like this, where it's a few pages, the first with those details and a nice quote for you. and then a few pages about the status quo tactic, the change tactic, maybe some graphics, a little bit of a story, and some questions to act as a worksheet to get you prompted to start. So bite-sized chunks. You don't have to spend an afternoon poring over the document. You might read the book from beginning to end. You probably don't need to. You can read the first 30 pages for the introduction, and then you can sample and, you know, delight in them such as you have a need. That's my goal for you. And so the opportunity you have, if you choose to lean into changing tactics, if you choose to lean into driving change instead of driving people, is to be what the odds say is that 1 in 10,000 who reads a book, understands it has practical application, and then takes action on it. And that 1 in 10,000 isn't my number. It comes from a story that I retell in the introduction of Ellie Goldratt, the father of Theory of Constraints, who actually made that case to a dear friend of mine who asked him, how can you give away your tactics in books? And Goldratt went through a story and said, you know, very few people even realize that they can implement the book. And those who realize they can implement it, very few do it. And so you have the opportunity to beat those odds. And you have the opportunity in sharing the book with others to help them beat those odds. Because, you know, as well as I do these days, a lot of people don't read anymore. They maybe read an article on their phone. They, you know, engage in the equivalent of the Costco sample, but never buy the entree. And we're not going to get powerful change in organizations unless we can help spread real, tangible tactics and changes in behavior to accomplish powerful changes in a powerful new way. So I'm trying to hold that light up to say there's a different way. And I'm hoping that it'll enliven you to be that spark that then spreads it from there and spreads it from there to help us beat those odds so that more people are choosing to drive change and choosing to change their tactics. And so this was a quick introduction to how the book is structured, what it's about. I really wanted to have more of a conversation with all of you about what your challenges are, and I'm really excited to have that now. I do want to share with you before we close, though, that it's not just if you go and say buy the books that, you know, oh, you know, there's April, the author, she's really, you know, trying to push her books for her. One, I believe in what the message they share. I believe in the powerful difference you can make in the world. And I invest my proceeds back into my passion project, which is creating Gully Crest Homestead, which is a retreat center for families with children with special needs. Right now, it's just raw land out in rural Washington State, but someday there'll be a nice camp there, maybe a nice lodge, and the opportunity for very weary families to come and find some accessible rest with some beautiful views. So every book you buy a few to share with your friends. Every book you buy, my proceeds go to that project. So I'm really honored to be here with you, honored to take your questions, and honored to partner with you in changing the way we change, especially in the Agile community. So there's a little bit about me in the slides. I'll share these with Neil. I think I sent them to you, right, Neil? So you've got them, we can share. If you're more interested in what I do, who I am, how I'm working in the world, and I really would love for you to stay in touch and check out my revamped website, engineforchange.com. There you can sign up to get the introductions to both books. Those will get sent to you automatically. You can also, if you're in a nonprofit, sign up, and I actually share PDFs of the books with nonprofits. And I believe, Neil, right, you had an organization and I sent you the PDF copies for one of those so you could leverage it and share it around your nonprofit. So really honored to be able to do that with folks.
Yes, I appreciate that.
Awesome. So actually it was, you know, a little bit faster than I thought I was going to get through it tonight. Maybe it's after a long day. I just talked fast and covered the highlights, but I'm here for you guys and anything you need for us to talk about how we can create change together. If I can get my slides to stop fidgeting. There. Thanks so much.
We've got a couple of questions in the chat, April.
Okay.
One is about sustaining change in an organization where changes in leadership can shift resources for the change initiative.
Yeah, so there's some tactics in the book around creating change buffers. So that was in the first book, was a key piece about the change buffers, which is whether you wrapper your change in a leadership buffer, which usually relies on that leader staying the same. A lot of people go to that one as a key, or a policy buffer, which is getting a rule or some infrastructure in place which says this is how big it's going to be, or this is how it's going to operate. Policy buffers are great ways of protecting your change from volatility of managers. And a policy doesn't have to be something, say, in like your official manual system. It can even be a chartering document that's a Word doc that is shared around. And as leadership changes, you say, actually, we chartered this and here's the details. And most folks, they just abide by that stuff. Or at least it gives you a backstop as you're trying to prevent maybe those atrophies of resources. The other thing to think about is a lot of times we tend to staff up changes with a lot more resources than maybe we really need if we switch from driving people to driving change. Because if you're driving people, you need a lot of folks out there sort of poking everybody and touching them and making sure they're staying on task. If you're driving change, you're usually focused on what you can control in the system, and you're finding people who want to partner with you. And so even if their boss sometimes tells them, hey, you know, deprioritize that, they'll usually still want to be part of it, and they'll figure out ways to do a bit too. So those are a few things, but there is more tactics in the book to help with that too. Is that helpful for who asked the question? Sorry, I'm not keeping up with the
yes,
chat.
it is. It's quite helpful. I think so what I'm understanding you're saying is that the change itself can require fewer resources than the status quo, and that sort of creating perhaps a leaner process is itself a buffer, because we can show the results, we can show the outcomes. I'm kind of curious about this. I had a little bit of a lapse of attention, I think, when you were talking about the charter. Could you go into that one more time?
Well, when you're chartering something, so I call them, in my first book, I call them the concrete goals. So some people will use like elaborate charter documents, right? Say out of, you know, PMI or whatever, right? It'll give, you know, here's a charter. I often just rely on a concrete goal, which is, it's sort of a Mad Lib. It says by, when, who will see, feel, touch, taste, experience, know. So a sensory result, what, where. And so you're filling in these gaps. So for example, the one that we did years ago, and actually today is the 7th anniversary of the playground, is we built a beyond accessible playground up in Bremerton, Washington. And our concrete goal was, by as soon as possible, children and adults with special needs in Bremerton, Washington will experience a beyond accessible playground at Evergreen Rotary Park. And what that allowed us to do was keep the boundaries of what we were doing clear and help everybody in the community know who had encountered our change, was it done yet or not? Because they could go and look. And if there were barricades up, it wasn't done. If the barricades were down, there was new equipment, it was done. That was today, 7 years ago, we took the barricades down and everybody got to play. But so a lot of times changes don't have a clarity like that around them. And so it becomes, it's an initiative, and it's usually, there's something in the book about this, there's usually an initiative like, it's Bob's change. Well, then if Bob gets bored, why would anybody care about Bob's change? And if Bob was the one making everybody do it, the moment Bob looks away, everybody scatters back to where they were. So if you instead take whatever is called Bob's change today and say, you know, by as soon as possible, the IT developers will experience a tool set for DevOps, for continuous integration and continuous delivery in the applications portion of IT at X firm, they'll know if you're done yet. And then usually the folks who are going to rely on that, say the developers, aren't going to want it to go away if Bob changes. So they're going to help you advocate up through their chain to get the attention of the new boss to say, hey, we were on a path towards that mountain of this DevOps system. That's still important for the business, right? And you can sustain it that way too. Is that helpful, Jeffrey?
Yes, and thank you for reminding me about the concrete goals, because I do remember reading that, and everyone's a change agent. So I'm going to go back and refresh.
Awesome, cool. Sharpens them all right up. It's really, really nice. Great. All right.
We have a question from Thomas Nielsen, who's asking about how to deal with a new business analyst who's come into his construction company and is pushing the idea of status reports, but not really wanting to do them himself, it sounds like. Thomas, do you want to expound on that at all?
I was mostly trolling in the chat, but yeah, that's a true story. We got a business analyst. Surprise! I don't know how they found him in 2021, but they exist. And I'm just like, we are like going from 5 individuals, contributors making software, and we want to move into like, we just want to bump it up a notch with maturity. And you know, what are the first steps in sort of starting to work together instead of being individual contributors each working on their own project? What, you know, how do and who get these people to start working on projects together and collaborate? You know, what's going to happen?
Yeah. So I think that concrete goal thing that we just talked about is really helpful to define those as the team, right? So that there's clarity around what we are trying to accomplish, right? So by as soon as possible, this team will release to production what and for what benefit, right? You can write something almost, you know, it's almost like a super user story, right? That covers the project.
Yeah.
And then it's, and who's passionate about making this happen, right? Or what obstacles do you see that are in your way of getting excited about this happening is a really important question to ask, because then you're giving people permission to share what is a concern, right? What's in the gap. Because oftentimes when we're driving people, we take someone not jumping in as evidence of resistance, and we go try and tell them again why they should care. Instead of saying, I'm just curious, you know, what about this mountain or the path up it is, you know, concerning for you? Or what are your thoughts? Maybe you don't even shade it to what's concerning. What are your thoughts about this? And then you're silent. Listen, right? Because versus trying to constantly, a lot of times when we're trying to, in effect, win people to our change, we keep selling and selling and selling instead of pausing and listening and letting them reveal that obstacle.
Yeah.
And if you can get them to reveal an obstacle and then you take action on it, rather than go, well, here's what you should do to fix that, which again, that's back to driving people. It's then you should. So somebody goes, yeah, let's say they say, I don't think we have a standard for something. And until we do, I'd be really concerned about doing this. You go, oh, I can see that. I'm willing to work on that. Is Tuesday at 9 okay? And you know, if you're willing to like jump in and do it with them, a lot of times they'll go, no, it's fine. We can do it without it. I've read that, right? When you just offer to help, sometimes it evaporates because they're like, oh, but if I have to do it, never mind, it's fine. Or if they're like, oh, you know, I can't meet then. Okay, when can you meet? Because I'm happy to work on it with you. The key is not to just take it and go do it, because then you're not really testing, are they committed to getting over it too? But you want to carry like, you know, 70, 80% of it of, I'll set the meeting up. I'll make sure we have what we need. I just want you to be there so you can share your insights. And it makes it hard for them to be like, no, right, and back away. And so it's a nice opportunity to get them involved to understand, but you're ending up, it can feel slow of like, peeling this obstacle out and that obstacle out, and that obstacle out. But if you look at the flow from the identification to you actually solving the problem and shipping whatever you're trying to ship, it'll be faster than if you went, maybe I should just yell at them again and then wait a few weeks and then yell at them again and wait a few weeks and then yell. That usually just extends out. How's that sound?
Well, I'm not one of the team members, I'm not the, I'm actually the second senior person in this team. And my boss was the first software developer here.
Cool.
And he's now the CIO. And he's looking to hire a development manager. So if anybody's looking, there's work in Durham, North Carolina.
Cool.
So yeah, it's just gonna be interesting to see how, how the group's gonna mature. What's gonna be a right step? What's gonna be the first step in that direction? It's gonna be interesting.
Yeah. Well,
I think that's a.
Go ahead, Neil.
Sorry. I think that's a great segue into a question from Joe K about how to keep our software team from sliding back into old practices and influence change throughout the C-suite and other parts of the company.
Oh, so this one's fun. This one's actually a tactic that didn't make it in the book because I was developing it while I was getting the book out and published. So you guys are getting an advanced tactic maybe that I got to get out on the blog. So let's start with the C-suite first, because this is actually a pet peeve of mine. This notion of thou shalt be agile, I'll be over here, right? I joked years ago, I gave a keynote in Poland. I said, when I started giving agile talks, we were talking about how do we get the C-suite to notice our agile efforts? And just a few years on, people were like, how do we get the C-suite to leave us alone and stop beating us about the head with agile, right? So into the space of trying to win them to these tactics, the key is to clearly differentiate between 3 categories of tasks. The first is tasks you can outsource. Now this is you yourself, but also let's talk about it like you being you if you were in a C-suite. Things you can outsource, things you shouldn't outsource, and things you can't. Because this gets very confused. It gets confused for change agents because we want to overly help, which sometimes weakens our leaders. And it gets confused for leaders who are accustomed to getting to outsource a lot of things. And I'd argue get it wrong. So let me give you what goes in those categories. So if we are going to, things we can outsource, let's look at it like around our house. You can outsource mowing your lawn, cleaning the toilet. The lawn doesn't say, but Neil, I thought we were going to spend the afternoon together, right? Its feelings aren't hurt if someone else mows it. You get that done. Things you shouldn't outsource in your life: calling your mother, hugging your children, kissing your spouse. Wouldn't recommend outsourcing those. Technically, somebody else can do them. Might not be the consequences you want. And then there's the things you can't outsource, like exercise. If someone else exercises, I don't get any healthier. And learning. If somebody else goes off and learns agile practices and I don't, and I'm in the C-suite, having more people who know agile doesn't make me agile. And this one gets really confused. And so if we look at this from our perspective as change agents and their perspective as a C-suite, we've got to be really careful that we can help with change efforts that can be outsourced. We can help with sending emails, offering trainings, organizing plans for how to get the coordination of, say, change agents together, running a community of practice. We can manage that really well for C-suite folks. We can assist them as they are change leaders, but they need to show up and build the relationship with the people who are creating the change, with the people who need to adapt their behaviors, with the suppliers, the clients, the employees, if they want the change to be theirs, that they can both carry and have the relationships necessary to sustain it. I've had a lot of contract folks who go into organizations who try to lead the change for the leader who hired them. And then they leave because the contract's done and the change collapses. And that's because we were hugging the children and calling mom and they weren't. And we had the relationship and they didn't. So though we meant well, we actually hurt them by doing it for them. And I've seen so many people frustrated that, why did I spend a year there if it all went away? Well, you contributed a little bit to the carnage, unfortunately, being overly helpful. And as somebody who's overly helpful, I've been there and done it wrong. So I'm speaking from that side of experience. And then when it comes to the things you cannot outsource, we do not do anybody any favors if we do the learning for them, if we do the sit-ups for them. So if they don't have experience making the hard choice of not breaking into a sprint to push their pet project and letting it finish and putting their pet project maybe in the backlog as top priority, but then you're not breaking flow. If they don't practice that, they're never going to be good at it. And every time you look away, they're going to bust in on that team and wreck flow. And I've seen too many times where folks are trying to protect the teams from somebody who doesn't understand, and that person isn't learning and they're not getting any better. And the moment you go on vacation, carnage is going to happen. And we're not doing them any favors because they're thinking, I'm at Agile because I got a Neil or I got a Jeffrey. And that's no, that'd be like saying I'm fit because my friend over there has really good abs and is running Ironman. I'm not fit, they're fit. And I can be excited I'm their friend so they can help me. But until I do my own miles, my own swims, my own bikes, I'm not getting stronger. So that's, I think, a helpful framework that you can use to understand how can you really help the C-suite get on board, but also understand what things you really can't or shouldn't do for them. So setting up opportunities for them to learn, setting up opportunities for them to practice. If they say, well, that's what I hired you for, explain the danger in outsourcing that to you and ask them, how can I partner to help you get opportunities to do it, but I cannot do it for you. And that's our big chat opportunity. And it applies the same with teams, right? Because sometimes they'll want us to do their work and we just can't. We got to help them succeed at it and them get the practice. That's our opportunity, to hold the space for them to practice.
Yep.
Is that helpful? It's a little long because I don't have it all written down for you. I'm sorry. I'll try.
No, it was very helpful.
April, do you have any book club type resources, questionnaires or discussion topics for either of the books posted on your blog or anywhere yet?
I don't yet, but that's good. I'll put that in my backlog after vacation. I'm going on vacation after this is done. So after vacation, I'll work on that. But in the meantime, if you want to, have a conversation around it, the nice part about change tactics, if you start there, if you don't want to go back and do everyone as a change agent, but you can, is the first part of change tactics isn't that long. So it's an easy thing to just assign, hey, read the introduction, and then let's have a conversation. And even an open-ended conversation of what did you take away? What did you think? Or the 3 questions. What most surprised you, right? What are you most excited about? And what didn't you like about it? That's enough to get a really good conversation started if you just want to prompt.
Absolutely. Those are great discussion questions for almost any book. That's for sure. What would you say is the key change tactic takeaway from this presentation?
Drive change, not people. That's my motto. That's my mantra. And that's my commitment in this world, is to try and help people shift from the status quo of driving people to driving change. It'll make it more joyful. It will deliver more sustainable results. It'll be faster. And it spreads in a positive contagion sort of way, right? A few years ago, we would say that went viral and we were really happy about that. That was a good thing. Now we're back to viral being a bad thing. I'm hoping that this positive idea spreading can be a point of enthusiasm in a challenging time. So drive change, not people.
All right. How do you deal with driving change when others are also trying to drive change? Maybe with different philosophies. Two ways to think about it. Someone focuses on driving people and orgs that might not communicate well, and the system is changing out from under you.
Ooh, there's a lot of variables in that one. Let me see if my high-end mathematics for change comes out all right. One of the best ways to clarify that whole, am I in your space, are you in mine, is the concrete goal piece. What am I trying to accomplish, and does that conflict or overlap with what you're doing, right? Because I mean, the playground example, we did by as soon as possible, we'd build the playground in Bremerton. We had people approach us and say, we want to partner with you. We thought, great, we want to partner with you too. And what they meant was they wanted us to build them a playground too. So around your concrete goal, you also need to set boundaries. Step one is conquer this mountain. Step two for us at that point was rest. We wanted to take a break from trying to build something in the community, right? So we actually told people that. And so when they said, well, we want to build a playground up here and we want to do this, we would say, fantastic, here's all of what we know and you go have fun. So sometimes you can break conflicts just by checking your concrete goal and your boundaries, because people will assume they overlap when really they don't. Because the status quo of creating change is to make it as big as possible, so you can get the biggest stick as possible or the biggest threat as possible, and then push it on as many people as possible. Size matters in driving people because you use the boulder to crush the resistance. With driving change, you can shrink that down. And we have this about heat up the teacup. This is one of the strategies in the book, instead of boil the ocean. And if you step back to heat up the teacup, chances are good your teacup isn't the same teacup somebody else is trying to heat up, right? I mean, even in the software space, you could have somebody who's working on, testing practices, somebody who's working on pair programming. But if you call it improving software development, it's going to look like you're both attacking each other, overlapping, or getting in each other's way. And maybe you have two very different concrete goals. I think I covered a few of the variables in that question, but it had a lot more layers to it. Whose question was it? Did I get close, or what did I miss?
That was Moss.
That helps. Yeah. I was also thinking of, like, for example, in, one example would be, we needed to change and use more contractors. But at the same time, my boss was kind of thinking, how can we just lower the cost of software development, totally. So somebody that has a hidden agenda and doesn't actually ever get it out. And you think you're driving towards one goal, but maybe the boss is driving towards a different goal.
Yeah.
And similar in like a nonprofit where I think that we're all on the same boat and going towards the same thing. And all of a sudden it turns out, well, nobody told me about this other thing,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, sometimes with those, if people aren't revealing them, right, and saying, actually, you declare your concrete goal and they declare, no, I didn't agree to that one. I want to go here, right? So sometimes declaring it will help them declare theirs because they see in contrast. It's almost like turning up the contrast, but they still have to reveal it. So other times, if you turn up that contrast and you still don't see people orienting, that's where you can use the opportunity to get curious. Hey, I noticed this. Can you tell me about it? And you leave it very open, not judgmental. Why aren't you? Why won't you? What's in your way? Can you tell me about it? I noticed this. And then they, say something, and there's a question out there. Coaching Habits says, and what else? Right. And so you try and pull a few more layers out to understand. And then you
Definitely
go, oh,
helps
okay.
To get them to draw out those details for the concrete goal.
Yeah,
Well-
and then you can say, I think it sounds like you want to go over here. I would call that, by this day, we should do X, Y, or Z. Is that how you see it? Yeah. Okay. So maybe you add it to the mountain range and it makes sense. They're all aligned, or maybe it's, can't climb the Appalachians and the Cascades at the same time. So we're gonna have to pick. Are we doing one then the other? Are we all going one way or the other? But the faster you can surface that, the faster you can save a lot of time and energy. And if these tactics can help you do that. And that's also, there's a tactic in Everyone is a Change Agent called change perspectives and dissolve resistance. So if you feel like people are resisting, maybe because they see a benefit or a detriment that you're missing, right? They see detriments to the change or benefits to saying the same that you're missing. That tactic in that will help you with trying to get that out so that you're looking at it together versus it looks like you are resisting me. Like this is the right, the Zoom meeting you're having with people. Instead it's, all right, let's put up a whiteboard. All right, here's mine, why I think it's good, what I think is a risk, what I'm going to miss about the current state, what I'm not going to miss about the current state. Give me yours, and then I'll stay and figure out a win-win in this. And if you'd love to stay, I'd love to have you. That also too, because sometimes people just have never been asked for their perspective, so they hide it out of fear. The moment they share it, you're going to smack them.
I don't know if you noticed what April did there, but she didn't tell them that they had to stay and participate in the figuring out the win-win. She offered it as an opportunity. That's a great example of driving change versus driving people. You're driving and towards a solution and not driving people to be in that place with you.
Good one, Neil. We're a duo here.
I've
That's-
learned quite a bit from you over the years.
Oh, that's sweet.
Another question from Jeffrey White. If you were to make a Venn diagram comparing each of the following with change agent, what might we see? An internal consultant versus a change agent, an entrepreneur versus a change agent, and managing your own boss.
I think anybody in any position, right? Hence the title of the first book, everyone's a change agent. I think wherever you're at, if there's something you want to see that's different from what you're getting, you can find a bit of agency to go and work towards that. You can't guarantee how long it'll take. You can't guarantee the success, but you can, through your own actions, make tomorrow different from today. If only you find out this isn't the place for me, the change for me. I've seen people stuck in driving people where they wish the boss would change and they wish the boss would give them a different order. And then they lose a year or two of their life wishing and waiting instead of raising the issue and saying, I'm passionate about this. Does that align with where you want to go? And getting the, oh, heck no, I'm never going that way. So they can go, okay, I understand, and make it life change if that's where they want to do. Right.
Or they could apply the tactic of don't stall behind a no, number 44
Oh,
in the book.
there you go. There you go. So Neil wanted to talk about this one and we were looking for the segue. Great segue, Neil. So tactic 44, if you want to go into the book and check it
You
out.
happen to have your book?
If you happen to have it, if you go get the ebook, you can have it in half a second, but that's all right. So let me find my, if only I knew my own book well enough to find my
149.
There you go. Thank you. 149. So it's a funny thing when you write a book and you just keep writing and you just see it as a PDF, you don't realize how big it is until it shows up at your house and you're like, oh my goodness, what did I do? Just a thing that's ahead of you. So 145. Yeah. No, 145?
140, 249. Sorry.
There we go. I was like sending me the wrong place in my own book. That's funny.
Oh.
There we go. 249. Don't stall behind a no. Yeah, our goal is accelerate change with support from senior leaders. Our status quo tactic is when assume a no is a no and halt your change. So if you've ever tried to get a change to happen and you heard somebody say, oh, the CEO would never allow that. And you just go, oh, all right, then you go back to your desk or I don't know, hang up your Zoom call these days. Yeah, that's stalling behind a no. So the change tactic is assume that any no is a misunderstanding that can easily become a yes. And what I've found is when you go ask, oh, so the CEO told you we shouldn't, apply this agile technique to software development in this company. What you find is the person who told you the CEO said no, didn't even ask them, hasn't talked to them about it, just goes, oh, well, I've known him for years and he doesn't like stuff like that. Oh, all right, well, but it's years on. So I'm gonna ask him, I'll email him, depending on your company culture, how dramatic that is, right? But is there any way we could talk to him just to check? Because here's the risk to the business. Let's say Neil's my boss that's blocking me from getting my yes or no from the CEO. The risk to the business is if we don't find out the no is a no, we're going to stop something that could have produced business value. If we do, go and check, we might find out his mood has changed, his perspective has changed, and we can go execute on the business value we were hoping to get. And if we get there, this third option, and his no really is a no, I've got this tactic in my pocket, which is, okay, understand that, thank you. What would make it a yes if? What would I need to do that would change the conditions so you would be willing to say yes? That's usually the piece after getting to the person to find out, did you really say no? Or is somebody just telling me you did? Is the piece where if you do get a no, how to flip it again, one more try at it. And so, okay, thank you for the no. What would it take to be a yes if? And then just take what they give you. Don't fight it. Don't try to deny it and push it back on them for why it's not right. Oh, tell me more. Oh, well, what else would that take? And broaden it out, get as much as you can from them and go, okay, thank you. I'm going to go work on that. And a lot of times you can maneuver around a no that wasn't really a no and get to a yes, especially if you care about it. Is that helpful?
Absolutely.
It's
So one of the things that one of the reactions that popped up in the chat with that one is checking with the CEO is highly risky.
Well, and it depends on your culture, right? So I used to work in the naval shipyard, and if I had jumped 5 levels to the shipyard commander and asked him a direct question, it would have been seen as insubordination going around your boss. So part of this is feeling out the system. First you're checking. So say Neil's my boss and he says, the CEO says no. I can ask him the question, did he tell you that? Or are you basing that on something? And I can ask it with a curiosity. Did you hear the curiosity in my voice? Not the accusation of, I don't buy that he really told you that. You tell me that he did, right? So this is a tone issue in a relationship, right? But can you tell me? And how would we check if that's still true? And then you can engage the boss to help you in that. And sometimes what I've done too in situations like that is if I can't get quite that directness with the boss or the boss won't budge on it, I'll go sideways just to check. Hey, I'm hearing this. It's probably true. Again, grant it legitimacy. This is another one of the expectations, and everyone's a change agent. Assume positive intent. Grant the other person a valid perspective. Hey, maybe it's probably true the CEO is against it, but how do you see it? Or have you ever encountered a situation where he said that? Right. So you're not trying to disprove, you're trying to understand, and you're looking in effect like feeling down the wall for a crack to see if you can find a real answer instead of just sitting behind a no that's like a third hand no. And most times what I found, by the time I could get to that senior leader, it wasn't a no, it was a confusion, or it was 10 years ago they said we couldn't do something and somebody just set that like the default settings in a program, and those default settings just run and people didn't know you could go toggle that setting to something else. So those are some opportunities.
Policies that were implemented 20 years ago and nobody's ever revisited them, and you ask, is there a reason why we're still doing this? And they say yes, because policy XYZ. And you say, when was policy XYZ written? And they go 20 years ago. And what were the conditions around which it was written in? And have any of those conditions changed, or are they still valid? and then you find out, oh no, actually we should have updated that 10 years ago, and we should be doing something different today. So it's oftentimes asking the questions and not being afraid to ask questions that can get you to change.
Yep.
Beyond
Yep.
that, no. Yeah.
Yep.
All right, let's see. Any last questions here? I'm not seeing any new ones popping up.
Could I unmute and just ask a question?
Sure.
Yeah.
The pandemic has actually driven a lot of change in many ways, depending on what sector you're in. And so I'm wondering, if in my context, I've taken advantage of the pandemic to drive change, but the pandemic will go away in a way, right? I mean, and people are hungry for going back to whatever's normal.
Mhm.
So I'm kind of wondering, what tactics might assist in maintaining change, or I don't like the idea of maintaining change. It sounds weird, but continuing to drive the change, or somehow expanding it, despite a potential future where there is sort of this. Well, I guess where the pandemic is gone in this case,
Yep.
or mitigated to where it's less significant.
Yep. Yep. Great question. And I'm going to toggle ahead here if I can get my slides to go forward, just to show you something that I embedded in. Oh, okay. This thing embedded in how I've been describing my little engine for change company. Where what I'm trying to do in what I'm building and what I'm sharing with you is to really go past this sort of fads piece of like, this is what we do right now because it's the hip, cool thing, to fundamentals. And this is the part where, my engineering kicks in to positively plastically deform your company culture. And so what I mean by that is once you've started to drive change, and especially once people have experienced something where someone is driving change with them instead of driving them to change, you need to remind them of that feeling because they won't want to go back, right? You've in effect bent it past the point where when you let go, it doesn't spring right back, right? It stays a little bent. And never underestimate the power of the system to try and pull it back straight where everybody's just beating on each other. But the more opportunities people have to see driving change, the more they'll know how much better it can be, and they'll help sustain it with you. So it's repetition of giving people experience with it. It's naming it so they're not just going, oh, that's just how he is. This was the big challenge to scaling these behaviors before I was writing the books, is we didn't have a thing to call it. People just say, oh, that's just Neil being Neil. And not realize, no, you can do this too. It's a tactic, it's intentional, it's purposeful, and this is what it's based on. And these are the actions I take to comply with that. And you can do them too without anybody else doing anything else. So that's one of the ways to help keep this sticking, because as people go back into the office, I actually think that if people think it's going to reset and now suddenly they're going to be afraid of the boss again because the boss is down the hall, or they're going to be afraid of the PM because they can come over and hover over your desk, I think we're fooling ourselves, because people now are in the mindset of there's enough things in the world to worry about. You being slightly grumpy with me on a Tuesday because now I can see your face better is not going to scare me the same way. And that's the odd, I'd say it's a sad deformation that our psyches have gone through by going through the pandemic, but it's also real, right? A lot of people are less worried about those sort of petty dramas of you're going to be mad at me on a Tuesday than they used to be, because the systems are much more fluid. There's more opportunity to work from a lot more places, right? The job market's not geographical anymore. And I saw this with a major company I was in. There was a major layoff that happened. And in the time after that, the PMs lost a lot of power. The PMs that were driving people, they lost a ton of power because people weren't afraid of Joe or Jane PM is angry at me when their friends were losing their jobs. They didn't know if they were next. They were trying to shore up their res. You know, you being grumpy with me. Or the other thing that's in the book as well is the half-life of leaders or the half-life of program managers is shrinking, right? So the tenure of anybody who's going to remember if I tick them off is like, eh. And either I'm not going to be here or they're not going to be here. So why do I care if I upset them on a Tuesday because I didn't jump when they asked me to on something that if they'd asked me, I can't even get it done because they didn't give me the tools to do it. So I'm hoping that some of these plastic deformations in the organizational structure will further weaken the success of driving people. And those of us who are driving change can just spread it all the more.
It seems like in a way the pandemic and some of the responses that we're seeing is sort of a parallel to this notion of plastic deformation, because you're seeing the great resignation, you're seeing the people just saying, I've had enough with this, and seeing that they can actually do other things that are more in line with what they want to do.
Yep.
And so it's not snapping back. I mean, that metaphor of the system trying to snap back to a default is interesting, and seeing how this current situation of pandemic, it's not snapping back.
And it won't.
And perhaps an organizational change, if you can be that change agent, maybe you can contribute to that not snapping back in a more positive way, of course, than the pandemic.
Yep. Yep. And that's what I've seen in my experiences. You can positively warp people to where they tolerate less that mistreatment and they don't propagate it themselves. And that's a powerful way of healing an organization's change practices, is to say, as for me, I won't do that. As for those who work for me, I won't tolerate that. And I hope you would join me in this. And if you are interested, here's a book that'll help you understand it. Here's some words you can use. This is not something that's special to me. This is in all of us. Feel free to use it too. And I'm here to support you. And that's part of it too, is how do you build out folks who this is now their philosophy of change. So you've got that personal buffer, that friendship buffer. Maybe, if you're in a PMO, our good friend Liz, who wrote the foreword to the book, right? This is the way Liz works. This is the way her org works. That's a policy buffer, a leadership buffer. If you're in a position to do that, you can grant that to people, right? As for me and mine, we do this. And then the whole world can try and snap back, but it's not going to get in here. So think of that orbit you can create, and you can be that light that's shining.
I love that concept of, as for me and myself, we will do it this way.
Yeah.
And you're welcome to come along with me, but this is the way I'm going to operate.
Yep.
Yeah, it definitely makes a difference, and people do start to see a real difference when they start to follow some of the similar practices, like posting concrete goals. My projects wrote concrete goals and we posted them in the hallways when we were in the office, and they were like, everybody knew exactly where we were going and what we were trying to achieve. And it's kind of been lost sight of now that we're all working virtually, but it's still, we have them, we know them, we can share them. And other projects started doing the same thing because they saw the benefits of sharing things like that. Now we've started, since we've been in the pandemic mode, we're utilizing a lot of OneNote sharing. So rather than taking notes in a Word document and sending them around, we're sharing them in a shared OneNote space, and everyone can contribute simultaneously to the notes. So it's not all on one person, it's everybody in the meeting is participating and contributing. So that's just another way of our this is how we operate transparently. And it's open for everybody and anybody to come by and look at our meeting notes. They're all there.
Love it. Those are great. Thanks, Neil.
Yep. Well, anybody else have some questions? You're welcome to pop off mute and ask away.
Can we have one more example of driving change?
Sure. So, yeah, we use the playground example in the book. You'll see a lot of that. Another example that I talk about in a story is back when I was at the shipyard, we were trying to create a daycare center on the base. Now I know you're like, well, what about the work parts? But I can't tell, you know, naval shipyard actual, like, here's what we did on a submarine story. So they don't let me tell those. But here's an example of using it and the difference it made. So we were trying to open a daycare center on the base for folks to expand the childcare options for folks who worked in the shipyard and the Navy personnel. And for years, I was trying to do it by coming up with a rule they were violating so I could yell at them about violating a rule. And I couldn't find it. And I couldn't find any leader I could get angry enough about it. And I was frustrated. I'd work on it a little bit and I'd give up, and I'd work on it a little bit and give up. And it was just really annoying. And then I did this work. I realized the difference between driving people and driving change. And we switched it to, who would we need to partner with to make this happen? And what do they need us to do to carry that weight for it? Maybe we have to carry more than our share, but if we care about the outcome, we're willing to do that to make it happen. And we met with the folks who were in charge of regional childcare. They said, well, we would need this to tell the congressman that, to tell our senior leadership this. And we went and did it. They said, you need a survey, you need data, you need this, you need that. And every time they told us to do something, we didn't fight with, why would you need that? That seems silly. We just went and did it. And then we come back and go, okay, now what's the next step? And we went from about 7 years of trying to drive people. And in 3 and some years with driving change, we went from, hey, can we partner, to an open childcare center with the congressman, you know, with the big scissors, cutting the ribbon, all happy with himself. And it's still operating today. And that was more than 7 years ago.
So making the change versus making other make the change, is that the same?
Yeah, choosing it for yourself and clearing the obstacles. So what are you willing to do to invest yourself in making it happen? And if the answer is nothing, I want somebody else to do it, then you're going to be at the whim of somebody else doing it. And if you don't want to wait for them to do it, you've got to say, okay, it's the little red hen, right? I'll go farm this, I'll go grow this, I'll go mill this, I'll go bake it. And then you get to decide. That the hen doesn't share with anybody, but you can decide if you want to let them have a piece or not when you're done.
Another example that I think of quite frequently is trying to get an organization of solo developers to work together and see the benefit of pairing or mobbing. Oftentimes it takes really small baby steps. Like, for example, I'm stuck with my code. Would you give me a half an hour to come take a look at it and work with me to see if you can see something that I'm doing wrong or something that's causing this loop that's not what I want the behavior to be? And you start with that half an hour once or twice a week. People start to see the benefit of working together because you recognize each other's patterns, issues that you natively include in your code that they see and address in different ways. And then you start to see that pairing time extends beyond a half an hour to an hour or 2 or 4 every week. And it starts to be more of a pattern of, this is the way we work because we see it being successful for ourselves. That's an example of driving the change and how to start it from a concrete place.
Great example, Neil.
It doesn't always have to be you, but it definitely helps if there's someone who is passionate about a topic who's driving the change.
And helping the people who are passionate, who are running into a brick wall of trying to get other people to obey them, to pivot their tactics if you care about them enough, and not wanting them to burn themselves out in frustration and leave in despair.
Yeah, that's
Save a
a
lot of people with driving change.
great example of a successful Scrum Master is basically seeing that people are running into those walls and breaking them down for them, figuring out what can I do to go remove that barrier that's keeping the team from having the tools they need, having the space set up the way they need it to be successful.
And
Yeah.
helping the developer who says, we should all do X. And you go, well, do you do it? Well, no, that's not the point. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Go role model it and then we'll spread it from there. It's the simplest way I've gotten to get people to go away. You should go tell everybody that they have to do. Oh, okay, show me how you do it. Well, I don't do it, but that's not the point. Yeah, it is.
Thomas, do those resonate with you? Are they something that you could use?
Yeah, I'm very thankful. Thank you very much.
Awesome. That's why we're here, to help each other get better
Yes.
and to change our world in little ways.
Yeah.
Any other questions for April while we got her? We'll call it a wrap for tonight. And I want to
Awesome.
thank you so
Thanks.
much for coming out and sharing your book, introducing us to the tactics. I'm a huge fan, as you know, and I'm already using it.
Awesome.
So I really appreciate your work and sharing your work. I'm trying to not be one of the 10,000 that never apply stuff.
Yeah, you're doing a great job, Neil, and I'm really grateful everybody for coming out, and please do spread the word. You know, there's only one of me. I'm doing what I can with what I have where I am. That's my change agents motto. Spread this, but the farther it'll spread, it's folks like you, folks like Neil, you know, creating opportunities and leveraging it at work. And tell a friend.
And
Tell
if you are
10.
working in a nonprofit
Yep,
agency, reach out. April's made an offer in the book to make it available in PDF for free to any nonprofit. So take advantage of it, share it, and definitely let's change the world for positive.
Yay.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great
Thanks, April.
night.